Are you ready to take your creature game to the next level? Then come on down to the training ground. My name's Omen Hawker, founder and CEO of the Training Grounds, where efficiency is king. We understand that the modern mage can't spend a full turn on activated abilities. That's why, at the Training Grounds, all activated abilities are 67% off. That's right, 67% off. You pay 1 mana, you get 2 free mana. With a deal this good, you could boost creatures, draw extra cards, and deal damage like never before. And for a limited time only, activated abilities that cost 1 blue or less are absolutely free. That's right, absolutely free. Just tell them Owen Hawker sent you to redeem your free offer. There's nothing awkward about a deal this good.
One-time activation limited to once per turn cycle. Terms and conditions apply. The Training Grounds is not responsible for the targets or game rule implications of the choices taken by players in an individual game of Magic.
So visit the Training Grounds today and level up your game.
Welcome to the Faithless Brewing podcast. I am David Robertson, coming to you from the Twin Cities, and I am joined, as always, by the CEO of the Faithless Brewing podcast. He is Caved In Online, Dr. Daniel Shriver. Dan, the man, what is going on?
Hey, I'm doing well, David. I am back in Texas, safe and sound. I was traveling last week, visiting some family. We all went down for what was supposed to be a relaxing weekend, or relaxing week, I should say, at like a beach resort in Mexico. But then we ended up getting stuck on the way back. Like I checked in to the airport, getting ready to head home, feeling refreshed. And they were like, well, you can check in. Of course, with the volcano erupting, the flights may not happen today. We're like, what are you talking about? They're like, did I miss something? Like, is this 2012 and end of the world kind of thing? Well, it turns out that just about 40 miles out of Mexico City, which was where my flight was going through, there is an active volcano that just woke up again like 30 years ago and has been spewing chunks of ash and rock into the air. And wherever the winds blow, they have to occasionally shut down the airport. So it was a bit chaotic and ended up extending the trip by a few unexpected days. But it was all right. Got to see Mexico City, which is a place that I always wanted to check out.
Wow, that's pretty wild. I did not know that they had an active volcano like in the middle of the city there.
Yeah, I had no idea either. So it's not in the city, but it's close enough that...
Right, but it's close enough that the debris is a risk to planes.
Yeah, like the coating of ash just like comes over and gets on all the runways, gets on all the planes and equipment. The bed and breakfast owner was telling me that they have to like shut all the windows and like clean the streets whenever that happens. Apparently they have like decent advanced alert systems for... when a big eruption is going to happen. It hasn't actually like had a volcanic lava eruption recently in the last 30 years. But
did you remember the year that they had the 2 volcano movies that came out at the same time?
Remind me.
I forget. I think I only saw one of them. One was called Volcano. I think that had Pierce Brosnan in it.
Okay, that I remember.
Then there was another one. Just like, when they had the 2 asteroid movies the same year, Deep Impact and Armageddon. Like Hollywood just, I don't know what they do. They just hear someone is like making a movie and like, all right, we should rush ours to the theater and just buy some weird agglomeration effect. They'll go see it.
I remember the tagline for Volcano because it was so stupid. It was like, there are at least 300 active volcanoes in the world that we know about, and at least one that we don't. And like cuts to Los Angeles. It's like all of a sudden just like lava is like spewing out of the streets of Los Angeles.
All right, so correction. Dante's Peak was the Pierce Brosnan one.
Okay.
Then there was another one called Volcano.
That's the Los Angeles one, I think.
Yeah. That had Tommy Lee Jones and Anne Heche, R.I.P. Mm-hmm. Don Cheadle.
Okay.
Keith David? That's kind of a nice cast. I mean, Tommy Lee Jones was like, look, you guys are paying in cash. Yeah, I will show up. The 90s was a different time because you could have guys that look like Tommy Lee Jones or like Joe Pesci. They would be like legitimate box office stars for like 2 or 3 year periods for unknown reasons.
That is totally fascinating. I was just thinking the exact same thing. Yeah, like yesterday, like my wife just like put on the movie Speed for some reason, and like Jeff Daniels is an action star in this movie.
Yeah.
He doesn't look like he would make it today in this day and age, but he had a great career.
And yeah, he could do it all. You know, he's in Dumb and Dumber, you know, like all kinds of ridiculous like humor there. And then he's in Squid and the Whale, which is an incredible film. And then, yeah, he's also street fighting Dennis Hopper's bombs.
Yeah, exactly. So apart from 90s cinema, what else been going on with you?
Just living the dream. We had Art of World this weekend, which was like the biggest Art of World ever after, you know, being off for many years because of COVID. Last year, the weather was terrible. This year, the weather was spectacular. I think there was like 50 or 60,000 people in Art of World looking at the art. A bunch of bands playing. The band Fastball of 90s fame played a set at Prize Brewery. That was tough. If anyone out there is going to ever have a one-hit wonder, please save your money. Do not do drugs.
I bought that CD from, ashamed to say, for $17.99 from Best Buy or whatever it was back then.
I think there were 2 original members. I just, it was more morbid curiosity. I didn't even care for the Fastball single when it came out back in 98 or whatever. But
now, were they like a Minnesota band, or were they just, this was the only thing they could land? Okay.
Yeah. They weren't even like the end band. They were like, there was a band after them and Prizes, for people who don't know, is on the other side of the river. So they weren't even in the middle of Art of World. So it's just like, this is an ignominious fall from grace.
Is the band Soul Asylum still grinding it out at the Minnesota festivals?
They are, yeah. Grinding is the word. Yeah, they'll be playing it, you know, like the Aquatennial. They'll be playing at the
Basilica Block Party.
Maybe the free stage at the State Fair.
Yeah. I mean, good for them, though.
They were in like a 90s nostalgia tour, or, you know, they were like one of, you know, 20 acts, like the Counting Crows. They opened for slightly bigger 90s acts on a lot of tours.
I mean, that was like the soundtrack of my youth, so I'm not going to hate on them at all. I appreciate the craft.
Runaway Train, man. It's a great song. Misery Incorporated or whatever. That's a great song, too.
Yeah, I mean, it got parodied by Weird Al Yankovic, so...
Yeah, that's it. They made it.
Yeah, but no, I mean, Art of World sounded great. My dad sent me a bunch of pictures. I think he made it to like 400 galleries in 2 days. So he was busy. He was exhausted. Looked like a great time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, from there, from the beautiful world of the art scene in Minneapolis, we can go back into the computers, upload our minds into the wonderful world of magic and magic online discourse. What better place to spend the span of a podcast?
Yeah, and this week it's Dan Shriver in his element. We are talking about 2 new blue cards, kind of released back to back, or I guess in Mom and then Mom Aftermath. They have very similar effects. They both cost 1 mana. I'm waiting to hear from you on how good Omen Hawker is in the limited format before we determine if this is a true Dan Shriver masterpiece. But we're talking about Omen Hawker and Training Grounds.
I believe it is one of the worst performing cards in limited, like one of the biggest trap cards in the limited environment.
Well, that'll happen.
so there's that. But yeah, Omen Hawker. So Omen Hawker is from March of the Machine. This is a card that I think, at least I put it high on my list of cards I was excited for. As I was brewing up, sketching out ideas, it looked like the kind of card that was going to be more successful in Pioneer than in Modern, for various reasons. But the frustrating thing was that in Pioneer, you didn't really have that many options to duplicate the effect, right? Like, it's kind of a standalone card. We talk about the rule of 8. You can maybe find some backups in like Zirda the Dawnwaker, or maybe Renowned Weaponsmith or Powerstones. But realistically, if you just want like a big mana boost towards activated abilities, Omen Hawker was the only thing you could do. And then, out of nowhere, right, this March of the Machine Aftermath leak happened, and sure enough, Training Grounds, a card that's very similar to Omen Hawker, printed or reprinted into Pioneer, so now we can do it all. We can build the Omen Hawker Training Grounds deck, or we can go different ways. We can build dedicated Training Grounds decks, dedicated Omen Hawker decks. They don't have to be played together, but they could, in some cases, be stronger when paired.
Yeah, I mean, I actually don't think they're replicative effects, and playing them together is actually really hard because you've just put 8 cards in your deck that don't exactly do the same thing, and they definitely do nothing on their own. So that was actually a challenge as I started putting decks together.
Yeah, so maybe it's worth doing a head-to-head. Well, we'll read the cards first, just to make sure we're on the same page. So David, walk me through the text of these 2 beautiful blue 1-drops.
Omen Hawker, 1 blue mana, 1/1, taps to make a colorless and a blue mana, and this mana can only be spent to activate abilities. It is a Cephalid Advisor, so the creature type does not matter. Functionally is a Soul Ring if you can find a use for the mana that it makes. It's a 1 mana card that makes 2 mana. So that's the thing that kind of gets your brain fired up as a brewer. Dan identified this immediately. It's a very unique effect in the history of Magic. At times we've had 2 mana cards that make 2 mana that has to be used specifically for certain things. This is much more open-ended. Any ability, so it could be ability on a land, an artifact, an enchantment.
Yeah, I think Zirda is the closest in being able to reduce any kind of activated ability, but even Zirda has restrictions. Like Zirda can't reduce the cost of a land. So Omen Hawker can actually pay for the Nykthos activation. It can pay for like a filter land activation.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Omen Hawker as well is that because it is a card that has an activated ability, you can play it with Zirda.
True.
Which is not the case for Training Grounds, and you see people run into that all the time. Well, if we thought about Zirda, well, if you're going to play Training Grounds, 4 of them, then you can't play Zirda. But Omen Hawker is a card you can pair with Zirda if you want. You have to make some sacrifices, but...
All right, so that's the Hawker. What about the Training Grounds?
Training Grounds, 1 blue mana again, enchantment. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost 2 colorless less to activate. This effect can't reduce the mana in that cost to less than 1 mana.
All right, so that's going to reduce your generic mana costs in the activated ability. Yeah. So the most you're going to get from it would be something that, let's say it costs 2 colorless and 1 colored pip. Something like that would suddenly, you get a massive discount, right? It would only cost you 1 colored pip.
Yeah, that's the sweet spot where you're maximizing that 2 colorless, you're reducing it down to exactly 1 mana, which is the most it can reduce it to, whether it be a colorless mana or a colored mana. And then in theory, this ability that they've priced out at 3 mana that you're getting for 1 mana is making up for the fact that you've spent a turn playing an enchantment that doesn't do anything.
And that's always the rub, right? Like it doesn't do anything, and even if it does something, it's not totally clear that you're getting your card worth out of it, because these activated abilities tend to be overpriced. They tend to not be the main reason you play these cards. A card like what's the spirit? The 1/1 spirit, Spectral Sailor, right? Like that one, you play it as a 1/1 flyer, you can occasionally pay 4 to draw. Do you want to play Training Grounds to draw faster? Well, maybe, but even then it's still like 2 mana to draw. It's not necessarily a great plan. On the other hand, maybe there's a card that, it's a creature that has an activated ability that's like a 2 mana ability in Training Grounds gives you a 1 mana discount. Like, is that even worth it? Or is it just better to just not worry about the Training Grounds and just play the creature as is?
Yeah, because the Training Grounds cost a mana the turn you play it as well. So it has to be reducing, by more than that just to get that mana back.
So it's a little bit troubling that Training Grounds has been legal in Modern forever, and it's done literally nothing the entire time. Maybe there was once a combo deck with Eldrazi Displacer that tried using it, but it barely is published. It's a card that has been so expensive because it's a casual hit and it's a unique effect that it's almost just was never worth paying the $50 a copy to brew around. So there's not that much known about Training Grounds in Modern, but moving to Pioneer, a smaller card pool, perhaps more forgiving, and with some new printings, maybe there's a chance, this is my hope anyway, that Training Grounds can finally break through, maybe with the help of Omen Hawker, or maybe not.
Yeah, I will say way back in the day, there was a super fringe, and this isn't even tier, Z. There was a super cool, there's a, the blue-red guild mage could copy a spell for 2 and a blue.
Yes, that's right.
So I built a super sweet modern deck, and I think a couple people like 5-0'd at various points, where you'd reduce the cost to 1, and then you'd copy Manamorphose, so you draw your whole deck and make infinite mana. And that was super sick.
Right. That's the original Izzet Guildmage, like the first of the Guildmages, where they had
from Ravnica, original Ravnica.
Hybrid costs in them.
Yep.
And that again is at the sweet spot where its activated ability was 2 generic plus a colored pip. So you lop off the 2 generic.
Yeah, 2 in a red to copy an instant and 2 in a blue to copy a sorcery, or vice versa. I can't remember which one. So you just cast Manamorphose with 3 mana up, copy it on the stack, make 2 mana, copy again. So you're getting a mana of any color. You draw your whole deck and do whatever you needed to do. And you could play, there's a blue counter non-creature spell that you can spend 1 blue to discard it and search 2 to your library for a 2 mana cost. So it could find either piece, it could find the Manamorphose or the Guildmage.
Oh, Muddle the Mixture.
Yeah, Muddle the Mixture. And Muddle the Mixture was a 2 mana spell you could copy. So you could like Muddle the Mixture, their spell, they counter back, and then you like copy it with it on the stack.
Oh my gosh.
That deck was sweet. You can't do that anymore. I mean,
would you believe me if I told you there's a Muddle the Mixture in one of the decks we're going to talk about later today?
I saw it. That's what I was just like, oh man, someone's bringing it back.
And it's also in the Rebecca Gay Secret Lair, which is currently for sale. And I usually don't mention these things, but it includes Stoneforge Mystic, which is a card that like I've been thinking about buying for a long time. And if you want them, you can buy them at a decent price through the Secret Lair. Doing my part for Hasbro.
Faithless Brewing Finance has spoken.
Exactly. All right, so the head-to-head. So as David said, they're not exactly the same card. Actually, they diverge in significant ways. But the mana cost is the same. Could easily put them in the same deck.
Yes.
Both great on turn 1. The Hawker, of course, being a creature, it's going to be fragile. It's going to need to untap. The Training Grounds is somewhat more resilient. That's less true in Modern than in Pioneer, but in Pioneer it's probably going to survive. It's a little bit better on turns 2, 3, 4 because, you don't have to worry about it surviving a turn to do its thing. You can just slam it. It can potentially give you the mana back immediately by, reducing some cost you were about to pay anyway. The Hawker works with so many more cards than Training Grounds. So many more. Activated abilities, there are actually plenty of them that do see play already in constructed decks, and that's kind of where you want to be as a brewer, right? You want to be dealing with cards that are like already good enough that just get better with the knucklehead card we're trying to put in. And Omen Hawker has plenty of cards like that, like Reckoner Bankbuster, for example. Perfectly good card, great card in some scenarios, works beautifully with Omen Hawker. A channel land like Otawara or something else, or Hollow Storm Giants. All of these can feed off the Omen Hawker. They don't do anything with Training Grounds. With Training Grounds, you're looking at like very specialized creatures with activated abilities, and almost none of them, like we'll talk about some of them, but almost none of them are current staples of the metagame. Training Grounds, as we mentioned, is only going to reduce generic mana cost. The Hawker can provide blue mana. The Training Grounds can never go less than 1 mana. The Hawker can pay for something entirely. It can be a pure Soul Ring. And the Hawker is only once per turn, or twice if you have Tyvar. The Training Grounds is repeatable, so the ceiling is a little bit higher there. It does function better within certain loops. So I mentioned the Eldrazi Displacer loop, where you're flopping 2 mana off that cost. Now you can blink something for just 1 colorless every time. What would that be? It would be like the 4-drop that makes Eldrazi Scions, Eyeless Watcher, something like that.
Yep.
That's a combo. Drowner of Hope also works within that combo.
Yep.
We'll talk about a new combo you can do with Training Grounds that uses Drafna and Mox Amber. So Training Grounds loops in ways that Omen Hawker doesn't. But in general, I think we could say that every Training Grounds deck could potentially consider the Omen Hawker, right? Because every Training Grounds eligible creature will also benefit from the Hawker.
Correct.
That's not true in reverse.
Correct.
So we will see some Omen Hawker decks that just don't want the Training Grounds at all.
Correct.
All right. Anything else we should know about these two before we look at some lists?
No, I think you covered it.
All right. So I had a big research document on Omen Hawker, and I don't know where it is anymore. I lost it somewhere.
Wrote a thesis statement.
I did. I was like getting these notes together. I'm like, well, I don't need to redo this search because I'm sure I did this.
Wouldn't it have been like you should find the week that Omen Hawker got spoiled? I feel like that's where you had a lot of your notes.
Maybe.
Or did you check
I
that?
found the deck list that I sketched up from that search. They were horrible. I did not find the actual list of cards itself.
Oh, okay. It's a shame.
I did find a list of cards that work specifically with training grounds, and this is a much smaller list, and it's like some decent stuff on here. I'll mention cards like Fiend Artisan, Gretchen Titch Willow, Walking Ballista, Spectral Sailor, Duskwatch Recruiter. I mean, you can kind of see like these cards are sort of fine. They've been played, but they're not great. I think the ones that are the most interesting are the 1-drops. So here we have options like Concealing Curtains, Knight of the Ebon Legion, maybe Ashnod, the Flesh Mechanist. It's going to be tricky. Like you're going to have to like take a leap of faith on some of these creatures, but we'll see how that all looks in the decks. So with that, David, let's go start in Pioneer first. Tell me what you have been brewing up here.
Yeah, so you shared a tweet for me from Pascal Maynard, former Magic Pro Canadian, and he said he'd been tooling around a lot with Omen Hawker, Reckoner Bankbuster with Zirda lists. And one of the things he was playing was like 27 lands because Omen Hawker, as you pointed out, works really well with a lot of these utility lands. So works very good with Field of Ruin, works very good with Castle Vantress, works very good with Otawara and Iganjo, can cycle your lands. Hall of Storm Giants can activate creature lands. So he has a list, and he said this is kind of as far as I could get it. So his list has 4 Omen Hawker, 4 Reckoner Bankbuster, a bunch of 2-mana counter spells, Neutralize, which is kind of a cool counter spell with Omen Hawker because it can cycle it. Sunfall, which is a 5-mana, the powerful limited sweeper. 4 Shark Typhoon, which is kind of a cool card with Omen Hawker. So sort of a control shell that's playing like 4 Omen Hawker as this like Soul Ring effect. And he said this is kind of as far as I could get it. I've 3-2'd, I've 4-1'd, I've 2-3'd, I've tooled around, and here's kind of where I'm at. And he sort of encouraged people to take the next step. So you shared that list with me. I thought it was really cool. I hadn't really considered it. And so I was like, well, if we're playing 27 lands anyway, because we're trying to take advantage of Omen Hawker and we're using our like Otawaras as spells, one of the things we like to do when we're playing 27, 28 lands is to play Lotus Field. Lotus Field has kind of a 2-pronged effect. One, I think it can turbocharge our deck because you can get your like Lotus Field into Teferi draws. The other thing is that Nimble Obstructionist is a card that you can cycle on turn 2 with your Omen Hawker to counter the Lotus Field trigger. So your nut draw, if your opponent does nothing, your opponent is on red-white Convoke, right? We play Omen Hawker. They play Thraben Inspector, which should be banned apparently, according to some people. Then we can play Lotus Field, cycle Nimble Obstructionist, because Omen Hawker taps for 2 mana in our land that plays Omen Hawker as the 3rd. We draw a card, we prevent the Lotus Field trigger from making us sack 2 lands, and then on our next turn we get to untap with 5 mana. Thespian Stage, if we're playing Lotus Field already as a 1-of, is interesting. That has an activated ability that Omen Hawker gets to copy. I'm still keeping the 4 Reckoner Bankbuster. I really like that. I went up to 4 Censor. Censor is... I just disagree with people. I just think Censor is better than Make Disappear. And especially if we're going to play 4 Omen Hawker. I mean, if we get to cycle it for free, that's awesome. I have a 1-up to Fairy. That should probably be another Nimble Obstructionist or something. I like Vizier of Tumbling Sands. It's a cool card to cycle with Lotus Field. It's like a super Manamorphose, right? It makes a mana and draws a card. Well, with Omen Hawker gets to just tap as an actual mana dork and draw a card with Vizier. You just tap a land, and then you tap Omen Hawker and Vizier untap the land if you want, or if you know you can use the Omen Hawker's ability, the Vizier can untap Omen Hawker. So I think that's actually like really interesting to me. There's maybe a version of this that goes up to like the full 4 Nimble Obstructionists, the full 4 Viziers. Teferi, like I said, is a card that pays us off for Lotus Field. We are playing this control deck. The 4-mana Teferi was really only interesting because I found it to be really good with Reckoner Bankbuster and the 1/3 that taps to make 2 mana for our artifacts. You just get to like cruise through your Reckoner Bankbuster so fast. But maybe in this deck you don't need it, I don't know. And then, 4-star Typhoon, I think that's a must with Omen Hawker. So similar shell, just basically like adding Lotus Field as like outs to go large, because if we're totally honest with ourselves, Omen Hawker is going to die every time. It's just not going to live. So building your deck around Omen Hawker completely is tough, as you pointed out, Dan. It does not have replicative effects.
So to clarify, you are playing 4 copies of 5 mana Teferi, the hero of Dominaria.
Yeah,
and you're playing one of the 4 mana Teferi, who is Teferi, who slows the sunset, who can untap lands, artifacts, and creatures all in one shot.
Yeah, and I'm thinking I maybe wouldn't do that. I don't think Omen Hawker's going to live, so I actually would just maybe be out on that.
I do kind of like how it's the only creature in the deck, right? Like, removal is not super good against this deck, so game 1, you each just have what you have, but in games 2 and 3, like, if you're the opponent, how much removal are you going to leave in? Like, are you actually going to leave in cards just to kill the Omen Hawkers?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's fun to imagine this thing, and if I got to sit in the room with my opponent while they pondered that fact, that would be interesting. But in game 1, I'm going to play it, it's going to die, so I'm going to turn on their Fatal Pushes, which a normal blue-white deck would never do, and then you'll still have all the problems of a normal blue-white deck. So I actually think you've significantly harmed your game 1 chances to do this.
So the other thing that makes this list attractive is that there's not really that many bad cards, right? And this is more true of the Pascal Maynard list, where he's not even risking the Lotus Field. He's just playing more or less proven blue-white cards, but he found room for the Bank Busters, which you typically wouldn't see 4 of those in blue-white, and the Omen Hawker itself. The rest of the cards are all fine. The fact that Shark Typhoon is a fine 4 of in a blue-white control deck that also is super explosive with the Hawker, right? Turn 1 Hawker lets you make a 2/2 Shark immediately on turn 2, drawing a card, and it just gets better and better the later you go. So I think like the fact that the payoffs for the Hawker are already reasonable control cards is what makes this a very promising shell. He's even got a Zirda in the sideboard.
Yeah, so I kept that idea. I would typically not play the same removal suite. I would play a couple 1-mana white artifacts. I would play Portable Hole. I think it's the best white cheap removal spell. I don't have that in this list right now to preserve Zirda, but I just don't believe in Zirda. So if you told me to like optimize this list, I'd probably just play like 2 or 3 of them. I just think it's a really important card. You know, for Bankbuster, it's a fine card. I guess it might get banned in Standard. No deck plays 4 Bankbusters. So I think that's a little bit of a question mark too. Like, after they kill your first turn Omen Hawker, your Bankbuster is, like, if you draw a second Bankbuster, you're just so hosed. You're just not going to have the time to use it. So that's why I'm hoping the, like, mana push from Lotus Field. Like, you have your Teferi, you plus it, you draw. Now all of a sudden you get to like activate your Bank Busters, you know, at the end of every turn if you don't have counter magic or whatever. So
yeah, no, it's an interesting direction to go to try to like juice up the list from where Pascal Maynard left it. It's reminding me a little bit of, you know, talking about Bank Buster. Back in our Shark Week, you know, you had been doing a lot of work over many months on Renowned Weaponsmith as like a mana engine, and you can put Hawker in the same bucket with the Weaponsmith. You can put Tezzeret 4 in there. And now you have like all these cards that generate special mana towards artifact, casting artifacts or activating their abilities, and like Bankbuster can be a payoff there. So there is something there. I know you proposed some Shark lists along those lines.
yeah, and if you wanted to go all in on Bankbuster, I think that's what you should do. Like, play a couple of the 4-mana Teferis, play 4 Omen Hawker, and yeah, play 4 Weaponsmith. Maybe you play like 4 of the 1/1 dude that gets +1/+1 whenever an artifact enters play, and you just try to play a mid-range list, and then maybe you have like you're still playing a little bit of the counter magic suite, because I do think Omen Hawker is really good with like the natural neutralize like sensor package. But yeah, you still need to play 4 Shark Typhoon. I don't know, like going more into these creatures that are very fragile as your mana source is just, it leaves you vulnerable to certain things, and obviously leaves you better off against other things.
Did you see, David, there was a Zirda deck in the 5-0s last week? Can you guess what it was?
No. Lotus Field?
It was Sultai Rona combo, but they just happened to be Zirda compatible, so they had no red mana, no white mana. It was just like you can put a loot fodder into your hand from the companion zone.
Yeah, that's awesome. Good job on companion design, Wizards.
All right, so from there we go into the speculative waters of combos with Omen Hawker and Training Grounds. So I mentioned at the top Eldrazi Displacer combo, but we got a new combo, brand new combo.
Yeah, so I didn't even bother proposing. Like, we all can imagine what the Eldrazi Displacer combo deck would look like. People have tried it. I'm not going to propose it because I know I'm not going to play it. So, Omen Hawker 4 of, Training Grounds 4 of, Reckoner Bankbuster 4 of still. I think you kind of need that to like get a card out of your Omen Hawker, hopefully early. 4 Patchwork Automaton. So the theory I had here is like Patchwork Automaton is kind of like our Tarmogoyf in our combo deck, where even if they kill our combo pieces, the Automaton at least puts pressure on them on the board. So the thought is with a Training Grounds in play, Drafna's ability to return artifacts to your hand costs 1 blue. Well, Mox Amber taps for a blue with Drafna in play. So you have infinite amount of artifact castings if you want it with those 2 cards in play. So you can do that as early as turn 2. Infinite artifact castings either means you can untap your Rona an infinite amount of times. It means you can trigger a Patchwork Automaton an infinite amount of times. Or if you have an Altar of the Brood in play, you can mill out your opponent. So we have a 1 of Altar of Brood in play because if we set up this combo with Rona lets us basically like filter through our deck, find our second Mox Amber to get that 1-turn boost, and put the Altar of Brood in play, complete our combo them. Everything else is just cheap legend. So for Drafna, for Kinnan sort of doubles up on that. So with a Kinnan and a Drafna in play, Mox Amber taps for 2, and it can bounce with the Drafna ability. So it sort of simulates the Training Ground. You have a rule of 8 there, if you want to think of it that way. We have a Patchwork Crawler, which is a card that can have its ability. It allows you for 2 and a blue to exile a creature from your graveyard, and then it copies the activated abilities that creature had. So Patchwork Crawler lets you copy Drafna if they were rude enough to kill it. And so it lets you do the combo another way. I have Karn in here as our sort of like mana sink, where we have a 1 of Altar, a 1 of Mox Amber in the sideboard. You could also play the Adventure Fairy, because all these cards are non-creatures, if you didn't want to play Karn.
Oh, Fae of Wishes.
Yeah, you could play Fae of Wishes as well. I don't know which is better.
I'm just going to read Drafna in case you're not familiar with the card. It's 1 and a blue, 2/1 legend. It has 2 activated abilities. The first one costs 1 and a blue. It says return target artifact you control to its owner's hand. So that's how we're going to do this loop. We're going to keep using that over and over again with the Mox Amber. It has a second activated ability that requires tapping. It's 3 and tap, copy target artifact you control. That's an artifact spell on the stack that you're casting. The copy will become a token. That actually has its own little combo with Ugin's Nexus. It's like a little hard to set up. It's pretty mana intensive. But the idea is if you're casting an Ugin's Nexus, activate Drafna's second ability to copy the Ugin's Nexus before it resolves. You get a bonus Ugin's Nexus. They both come into play. Legend rule, you lose the token. You're going to get the extra turn as long as you can get rid of the first Ugin's Nexus. So you actually then use Drafna's first ability to put the original Ugin's Nexus back into your hand. So does that actually have a place in this list is my question, like that second combo?
Well, you could just put it as a 1 of in your sideboard for Karn. I would not main deck Ugin's Nexus.
Okay.
If that's what you're asking me.
No, I'm just curious because I've seen like different approaches that are all in on that combo. It seems significantly worse. Yeah.
I mean, the thing that I'd be more interested in is like turn 1 Training Grounds, turn 2 Drafna, turn 3 cast Patchwork Automaton, copy it with Drafna, then you can go infinite with Mox Amber. You have 2 infinite power Patchwork Automatons on turn 3 that also have ward.
That's interesting. I mean, I see the thought process there, and I'm going to try to hold my biases about Patchwork at bay for a second, but the problem is that, like, if that's your 4th combo piece, it's not a guaranteed kill, and that's what is giving me a lot of pause. Like, there are other cards that are a little more guaranteed, right? So you need a Mox, a Drafna, and either Training Grounds or Kinnan. So it's a 3-piece combo to make the loop happen, and then your 4th piece is the payoff. What if we just like focus on payoffs that like for sure or probably kill them? Like you have the Altar here. You could do, what else could you do? You could do Sai, Master Thopterist. You could do Teething Wormlet for infinite life. You could do Diligent Excavator to mill them out.
Yeah, I guess to me, so the problem is, okay, those are infinite kills if they don't do anything, but a 1/3 that mills them doesn't do anything. The 1/4 also is not an infinite kill because you give them a chance to sweep.
Mm-hmm.
Teething Wormlet getting infinite life is the absolute opposite of a combo that kills somebody. I could see playing a Teething Wormlet in this list, but you have 4 Karns, so you have the ability to fetch artifacts that allow you to win the game. Or, like I said, if you wanted to play the fairy, you could play any other random non creature spell that allows you to combo win. But even just Patchwork with Drafna, no combo piece, for each blue mana you have up, you get to give Patchwork Automaton a permanent +1/+1. If you have a Mox Amber.
True. Yeah, I mean, Drafna by itself is kind of interesting card.
Also, we have Lair of the Hydra just as another card that lets us use infinite mana to kill them if we manage to generate infinite mana.
So one sideways combo that is worth mentioning is that we described Kinnan and Training Grounds as duplicative effects, but they do actually combine to produce an additional combo. So if you have both a Training Grounds and a Kinnan, plus your Mox and your Drafna, you've generated infinite mana now because the Kinnan is now gaining you a mana every time you do the loop.
Yes.
With the infinite mana, you activate Kinnan's ability infinite times. So as long as somewhere in your deck you have a non-human card that wins off infinite mana, that's another way to kill them. And just looking at your list here, I believe Gretchen can do that. Is that correct? Or
I guess in the sense that she lets you draw your deck and find Karn.
You'll make infinite, you'll activate Kinnan, you can find Gretchen, you can find Patch. Yeah, if you want to win this turn, I think Gretchen does it.
Yeah, because then Gretchen lets you use the infinite mana to draw your whole deck.
Okay.
And then you play Karn.
Nightmare to activate all this online, but it would work in paper.
Yeah. But yeah, I think you need to lock in, at least for this shell, the Training Grounds, the Rona, the Kinnan, and the Drafna. And then I do think that Patchwork Crawler is worthwhile. And then the 3 Mox Amber, if you want to play the Fairy or not. And then do you want to play Omen Hawker, Bankbuster, or not? I kind of think of that again as sort of our Tarmogoyf, fair plan when they stop our combo. It's really good against the kind of hate pieces people bring in against the Rona combo that exists. And we've seen the Sultai Rona combo struggle, and then Todd Anderson, Tandy MTG Online, and all the people working on it, they're always adding in all these Tarmogoyf-like cards, right? They're adding in the 1/3 bird that connives. They're adding in the Sultai rat that lets them rebuy legendaries from their graveyard. They're trying to find a fair plan where they can kind of attack once the opponent attacks the combo. So maybe it isn't Patchwork Automaton, maybe it isn't Omen Hawker, Reckoner, Bankbuster, but we've seen that this combo lends itself to being disruptible, and so you need a quote-unquote fair plan that lets you grind a little bit.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning here that Rona herself can be a Tarmogoyf, and this deck is much better at that than the standard Rona combo. You can flip Rona for either 3 mana or 1 mana in this deck.
Yes.
That's not going to help you against Fatal Push, but it will help you against burn spells. I mean, it's just a monster against burn. The 5/5 is just absolute monster. The Bankbusters, like you're saying, that can be an attacker. I would actually consider Reality Chip. I think that's actually a really important card for decks like this, specifically because it works with Mox Amber, so it makes the Amber a real card, but it also is just great with Omen Hawker, great with Training Grounds, and gets you through those weird clumps of air. So maybe a mix of Bankbusters and Reality Chips.
Yeah, and of course you can always put an extra Bankbuster in your Karn board. You can put an extra Reality Chip in your Karn board. So you can sort of have duplicative effects if Karn is not going to find a win condition. Maybe it just finds your Bankbuster, etc.
All right. So that's a Drafna combo list utilizing in both Training Grounds and Omen Hawker.
All right, then the next list is a blue-black splashing green just for Tyvar list that plays Omen Hawker. So the cards that Omen Hawker works well with are Concealing Curtains, Hive of the Eye Tyrant Odawara, and then Maze Mind Tome. So we've played Soul Diviner Maze Mind Tome lists in the past. And the problem is that Tome is only really good with Soul Diviner. So Omen Hawker kind of takes that to the next level. It lets you play Tome and activate on the next turn. You have the ability to control your counters on the tome, so if you need the life, you can kind of get it all the way to the end as fast as possible. If you don't need the life, Soul Diviner can keep removing counters to draw cards, and then Omen Hawker can keep putting counters back on. Tyvar lets us activate all those cards at instant speed and untap them. So basically, like each time you're untapping these guys, you're getting a full card out of it. Concealed Curtains is a cool card that you found, Dan. So we can go turn 1 Omen Hawker, turn 2 Concealed Curtains, and then flip it. So as like a duplicative Thoughtseize effect. So we've got 8 ways to attack, like Unfair Hands, and we can do it quite quickly. Jace Vryn's Prodigy is a card that lets us, in theory, double up on our Thoughtseize Fatal Push. Also, we don't have that many cards that have tokens for Soul Diviner, so Jace the Planeswalker is another way that we can find ways for Soul Diviner to tap. Then I have a suite of 2 mana removal spells, basically. So it's like a super low to the ground blue blacklist, and we just kind of wreck our mana because Tyvar is so perfect with everything that we're doing.
Yes, the last time I played a version of this, it must have been when Tyvar was first printed, right? And you'd drawn up a different version. The deck was super fun. It was so much fun. It was almost like right on the cusp of not having enough of each bucket of thing. Like the Soul Diviner needs cards with counters on them, and here we have 12 cards, right? You have 4 Tyvar, 4 Maze Mind Tome, and then if we count Jace, the backside of Jace has tokens. So like only 12 to enable your Soul Diviners. Here we're adding another thing, Omen Hawker, which you have Curtains, Tome, maybe some of the lands if we count those. So like again, we're like right at the edge of like not being able to actually get our value worth. And it's tricky because like when it worked so good, when it's getting busted up by just like the stream of removal from Rakdos or something, it doesn't feel good. That'd be a concern I would have even more so for this version. Like I want to love it, but I'm just like worried that it's going to get busted up too easily by removal. The other concern I would have is that like it's not totally clear how you win. Like you do draw a million cards, but it takes a while to actually kill them, especially since Maze Mind Tome is not Inkbuster, right? Like it doesn't ever become a creature.
True.
So we have the one Sheldred here that will hopefully kill them before we deck ourselves, but I was just wondering if we should like add more fats, like maybe just put Ronas in. They're pretty good with Tyvars. They flip decently with Omen Hawkers. They get fats. I don't know what you would cut for them if you cut Jace, but then you're losing out on your counters.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I guess the other card I would consider is the black 1/2 vampire. It works well with Omen Hawker, and it gets +1/+1 counters if they take 4 damage, or you take 4 damage, I guess, if you want to hurt yourself. So that's actually kind of a cool card with Omen Hawker. So Omen Hawker basically taps for the 2 colorless parts, so it's easy to pay the first trigger. And then once it has the first +1/+1 counter, Soul Diviner can turn that into cards.
Oh, that's beautiful. I forgot that works with the... Okay.
So maybe just like cut the 4 Jaces and play those instead. The problem is you don't want to play too many aggro-y cards because you're just not... If you're playing Omen Hawker, you're not an aggro deck. So like I've seen a lot of people like propose Omen Hawker, then every other card's like aggressive. Like Omen Hawker does not fit in these shells. That you want to get a lot out of that mana, and you want to accrue your value out of it. So I think you want to have a deck that can use that mana every turn, but if you're trying to end the game quickly, then I don't think Omen Hawker's a card you want in your deck.
Well, thinking along those lines, I do want to propose a list. Let me jump down a little bit in our outline here. So the last Pioneer list that I have on this plan is one that I was thinking about that exact problem. Like, what about the Vampire, the Knight of the Ebon Legion we're talking about? That seems really good, right? Like that was something that, I think we first explored that in our YouTube show with Wizards of the Coast, like when Zirda was still didn't have a companion tax, and I put that in like a Rakdos deck with Fiendars, and it was so sweet to just pump the Knight for 1 mana per activation. So like, what if you had Training Grounds? Omen Hawker, sure, let's get that in there too. And then the entire rest of your deck is just creatures that benefit from this, like mid-range, aggro mid-range creatures. So Concealing Curtains, Knight of the Ebon Legion, 4 of each. I'm going to play Captive Weird. I think that card's like actually potentially a big sleeper. It's a 1-drop, it's a defender, but for either 3 mana and a Phyrexian, right? So 3 and 2 life. Yep. You flip it into a 3/3 that draws a card. And if you are only paying 1 mana for that, because you either have the Omen Hawker or you have the Training Grounds, It's actually a pretty amazing rate, like 1 to cast, 1 to flip, and draw a card. I think that could be like the missing piece for this strategy. So I have Captive Weird, Concealing Curtains, Knight of the Omen Legion. Hypnotic Grifter is kind of a forgotten card. It's a 1-drop that connives for 3, but if it's conniving for 1, it's actually pretty attractive. So that's like 14 creatures that I'll call them aggro. Maybe they are, maybe they aren't. At 2 mana, couple reality chips, 4 Surge Engine. Not a card that's particularly strong, but if any card can make that work, I think Omen Hawker being able to pay for that blue will make Surge Engine succeed in a way that like Tezzeret couldn't do. And then just Thoughties and push however many lands you want to play.
Yeah, I mean, I like that this gets rid of the green, which is attractive. And yeah, it's at least worth trying. You know, I think I saw Aspiring Spike playing a similar, although not identical list today. Mm-hmm. And I think he just went 0-2, 1-2, and quit both of his leagues. But you're playing I do think I agree with you that for this type of shell to work, I actually love the Captive Weird. I think the card is, with these cards, is the kind of card you need to play, right? It turns into a kind of a threat, and it replaces itself. So I actually really like the Captive Weird. I'm not like in love with the Grifter. The Rona, I could take or leave, and Surge Engine is pretty bad. So I think we'd want to play a little bit more interaction. Is there a creature that has an activated ability that kills something?
There ought to be, right?
Like black X, like target creature gets -X/-X or something. I don't know what it would be.
I hope so. I haven't searched for it yet, but yeah, that should exist. Let's just say there is. Okay, so we'll cut the Surge Engines, put that hypothetical creature in.
But yeah, I like the Knight of Ebon Legion, Concealed Curtains, Captive Weird. Like, one of the things Aspiring Spike was doing was playing Pack Rat, and I think that's just like too many things have to go right. Like, it's only good with just Training Grounds, and then you're kind of all in. Like, you don't get to keep all your other interaction, and so I think replacing that with a card like Captive Weird is actually like, of course we know Pack Rat was a Terra in Standard, etc., but like a card like Captive Weird is actually better, I think. It gets up to 3/3 without a huge mana investment. It survives Stomp. It can threaten Planeswalkers early, can block profitably, and it replaces itself. And in a deck like this that has a bunch of pieces that suck without other cards, the ability to like churn through your deck is actually really important.
Yeah, so that's the hope. I haven't checked out Spike's leagues yet, but I know that Bomat Courier, who's Matt Camo, is experimenting with something similar that he'd been posting in our Faithless Brewing Discord. I hope there's something here. That would be a mid-range take, cutting as much synergy as possible to just have like reasonable creatures. All right, so let's go back up to something that is a little more combo focused. Specifically, we're setting Drafna aside. We're now looking at Wizard class combo. Oh, baby. Tell me about the Wizard class combo, David.
Yeah, so this is actually a combo that you pointed out. So Omen Hawker on turn 1, Wizard class on turn 2, and then you get to pay for the second ability. So you have 4 mana to spend. This fully uses it. So you get to have no maximum hand size. That doesn't matter. You get to draw 2. That's cool. And you're close, because the next turn, if you play a land, you can activate the Wizard class final ability, which says whenever you draw a card, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So, okay, that's fine. You've advanced through the Wizard class. That doesn't do anything. Benthic Biomancer plus Wizard class lets you draw your whole deck, which is super, super awesome. Or draw as much of your deck as you choose if you have another creature to target. Or no, it's a May, right? For Benthic Biomancer?
I believe so. Let me just check on that. No, it's not a May. Okay, it's not a May, so you do need to stop at some point.
Right. All right. Well, that's fair enough. So yeah, whatever. You put your last +1/+1 counter on the Omen Hawker. So okay, that's an interesting package. And then Benthic Biomancer's ability to get a +1/+1 costs exactly 1 in blue, which is what Omen Hawker taps for. So Omen Hawker works very well with both sides of those combo. And the problem we had with that combo is not that the cards are individually weak. I mean, Benthic Biomancer's a little weak. Wizard's class is clunky. But it was just that they were so mana intensive. So Omen Hawker actually kind of fixes that. It provides you a bunch of this mana and you're just looking for something to do. And it also gives you a ton of card selection, right? Like, part of leveling up our Wizard class so we can do our combo is we get to draw 2 cards. part of activating Benthic Biomancer is that we get to loot. So we have this like shell built in, and then I think it works very well with the sort of Verona, Mox Amber retraction helix, because both of those things allow you to deck yourself. Verona lets you do it if you have an Unctus in play, among other things. And so you just can play a couple of Thassa's Oracles that you can loot to or draw to as you're, flying through your deck with your Benthic Biomancer combo or your Rona. And at the end of it all, you're still winning the same way, which is specifically Thassa's Oracle.
Yeah, it's interesting. So it's a mashup of a known combo, the Rona combo, and a combo that it exists, but it's not a good combo. The Wizard class combo. The Mox Ambers seem like a little bit weak on average, but they make sense. You need to have them for the Rona combo, and you do have a decent amount of support between Unctus, the Reality Chip, Jace, and Rona. What's surprising is everything I mentioned so far is blue, right? So like this is mono blue, right? That's my assumption. And yet we see that you're going for the interaction routes. You're splashing black for push and Thoughtseize.
Yeah, and splashing is like, the other thing is the black splash is basically free. We're playing a single swamp. Every other land can make blue. I guess Takanuma. So, you need to play some kind of interaction. I guess you could do it in blue, right? You could play counter magic. But I think Thoughtseize and push are they're cheap, they're efficient. Your deck can play very few lands. We only have 20 lands here. You have the ability to loot away the cards that you don't like, which is awesome. Like Jace and Rona both just give you a ton of selection. The second wizard class, right, is not that useful. The Thoughtseize are bad in certain matchups, pushes are bad in certain matchups, extra Mox Ambers might not be useful, etc. Then plus you have like Unctus plus all these looters, right? Like Rona, play Unctus, like super loot, find a Mox Amber, untap Rona, do it again. Like you just saw most of your deck somehow.
Yeah, I mean, it's very intriguing. It almost makes you want like some graveyard value of some kind. I don't know if that's supposed to be a delve card or like something that just like activates from the graveyard, because we're going to be discarding a bunch of cards.
True. And it'd be easy enough to put, a Dig Through Time or something in here, or a couple of them.
Right, so that is a wizard class combo with a light splash for black interaction. I do think there is a missed opportunity. If you are going to play the second color, it means your mana base cannot support Nykthos. Now, the deck that you've described does not need Nykthos, but that seems like one of the most intriguing power-ups for Omen Hawker. Omen Hawker by itself pays for all of Nykthos' activation, so it lets Nykthos tap for 3 if we count the Devotion pip, right? It's like better than having 2 Llanowar Elves. This is a theory, at least, and this is something that only Omen Hawker can do, right? Zirda doesn't do this. Training Grounds doesn't do this. It's so tantalizing, and again, I'm gonna shout out this amazing article from friend of the show LAA11. I think we talked about this a few weeks ago, but he's got a Substack where he wrote all about blue devotion packages and what Omen Hawker could do in them, because he was very excited about the potential of, okay, what if Nykthos with Omen Hawker is just like an amazing mana engine. He talked about the theory behind the deck. He talked about the core packages you can swap in and out, the changes over time, like how different cards like Master of Waves, Gadwick became more or less important over time as the metagame shifted. And he even drew up like 4 different lists at the end, like 4 different brews that all combine different mono blue devotion packages with with Omen Hawker, with Nykthos. What am I talking about? Well, it could be the Leyline of Anticipation. It could be the Risen Reef package, which works amazingly with Master of Waves. It could be a combo with Unctus. So there's a lot of different ways you could win once you're doing the devotion thing. He's got a wizard class version in here with Benthic Biomancers. So I definitely encourage everyone to check this out if you're at all interested in Omen Hawker and Nykthos. We'll put another link in the show notes, and it's definitely worth a careful read.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many ideas here, right? You could spend a lot of time exploring each of these lists because they're all different, right? They have different strengths, different weaknesses. They're playing like actually pretty different suite of cards, which makes them like, you could try out a whole list, play multiple leagues with it, tweak it, etc., decide you like it or don't, and you'd still have a bunch more to find out because each of these lists, it looks like they actually play out quite differently.
Yeah, and we got some screenshots from LAA11 in our Discord. I think he went 4-1 with the Risen Reef version in his first attempt. I'm not sure if he's still trying these or if he's moved on to other projects. But I'm curious, like one thing that is not in this article that I think might be worth exploring is, do you remember, David, the Blue Defiler? The Defiler of something? Insight?
I do.
It draws a card whenever
A blue permanent enters play.
Right, and it allows you to pay Phyrexian for up to 1 blue pip.
Correct.
So what you could do, it's a 5-mana creature, but if you have that, you could, in theory, just like chain off as many 1 pip blue cards as you have. And I think it was a player, Tiamu on Magic Online, had been messing with this with like Flood of Recollection and stuff. Like it was a weird combo, but it involved a ton of blue 1-drops. He had Wizard Class, he had Witching Well. Trying to remember the other cards that were in that deck, but the top end was the Blue Defiler, Flood of Recollection, and like maybe Omniscience, something like that. Most of the deck was single pip blue stuff, and it occurred to me, like with Omen Hawker and Training Grounds, we now have a bunch of stuff that could work with that, and Nykthos was a big part of that plan as well, because you do have to like get up to 6 for, in that case, Flood of Recollection, or get up to 5 for the Defiler.
I think Flood Recollection is not the card you're thinking of. You're thinking like Flood of Tears or something.
Thank you. Flood of Tears. It bounces everything, and you can put something into play. Flood of Tears. That's right.
Yeah, return all non-land permanents to their owner's hand.
Yeah, so I'm just curious, like if either the Flood or the Defiler like could be an interesting top end to support this combo that's mainly consisting of single pip blue cards.
Yeah, the problem is you have to pay Phyrexian mana, right, with the Defiler, so you actually don't have infinite there, right? You can only pay these blue cards for free like 9 times.
Correct. Yeah, it doesn't draw the whole deck or anything like that. It just puts you up a ton of cards. Puts you up a ton of cards and lets your next Nykthos tap for like 20 mana.
A zillion. Got it. Yeah, that'd be interesting. I mean, I really like that Blue Defiler. I like the idea of being able to go infinite with the 2 fairies that blink each other over and over again. And I think actually a really good card in that shell is the 1-mana artifact that has the channel ability, the 5-mana channel ability, where it taps for a colorless if you tap it in a creature.
Oh, Moonsnare.
Because that actually sends you up a mana in the middle of your chain. Because you play it for Phyrexian mana.
Yes, that's it. That was one of the cards.
Draw a card, and then you tap your Defiler in that, and now you're actually up. You can play a 1 and a blue spell if you want that.
Yeah, I mean, with Omen Hawker, that's like a decent channel cost. 3 mana instant.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I guess that was my point is, now Omen Hawker turns that into like a 3 mana removal spell.
So there's a lot here to play with. I'm not going to propose a specific list right now, but really fertile ground, I think, for exploration. All right, so that's a bunch of pioneer ideas. But we're not going to stop here. We would be remiss if we did not mention the next deck, for which we have to dip back into Modern. This deck is the brainchild of Felix Slew, who is xfile on Magic Online. Managed to take 12th place in a Modern challenge with 4 Omen Hawkers and no sideboard. I do not understand what happened to the sideboard. If this was just a glitch or... But like everything else in the event, this is a Modern challenge from May 19th. Every other deck had a sideboard. This one did not. So maybe he just like found the perfect 60, registered it, and went all the way to top 16 in this Modern challenge. So David, walk us through this list.
Yeah, so as you point out, he has 4 Omen Hawker. He also is playing 4 Ragavan because, of course, we're playing Modern here. And then he has like a Wizards package. So he has 1 Jace Vryn's Prodigy, 1 Snapcaster Mage, 1 Magus of the Moon. And then he's playing Step Through. So Step Through, people remember briefly it had kind of a moment in the sun, but the main thing it does is it wizard cycles for 2 mana. So you can tap Omen Hawker to tutor your deck for a wizard uncounterably. And you can find it, whichever one of these wizards is relevant. It has a lot of other cards that work with Omen Hawker. So not just the Step Throughs, but 3 Shark Typhoons. We mentioned those before. Muddle the Mixture, we talked about before. So that's a card that lets you tutor anything that costs 2. So your options are a bunch of those 2 mana wizards, Counterspell, Expressive Iteration, one of the better cards in the format. Muddle the Mixture lets you tutor those. Muddle the Mixture is itself a counterspell. There's one of Sage's Dowsing, which is a tutorable wizard. It's a tribal wizard card.
No way. What?
Oh yeah, I've played this card in casual a bunch.
2 and a blue, tribal instant wizard, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3. If you control a wizard, draw a card. Oh my god. Well, that's value.
For 5 mana, you can mana leak somebody and draw a card for your pleasure.
Gosh, the Omen Hawker's not a wizard. It's an advisor. That's so upsetting.
Yeah, so is Nimble Obstructionist a wizard?
It is. That's a bird wizard.
Okay.
Yeah. So 3 copies of Nimble Obstructionist, 3 Shark Typhoon. There's stuff here. There's enough stuff to make the Omen Hawker value, give it that soul ring text. But boy, these are some weird cards.
Yeah, I thought maybe they'd have an Urza's Saga package. You pointed out that Omen Hawker lets you pay for Urza's Saga. No dice there. There's only 1 Otawara. I guess it can also pay to sack your Fiery Islet. No creature lands. So yeah, that's it. It's just there to cycle stuff, basically. It's like a type of draw.
I guess it can dash half of Ragavan. You still have to pay the red. that's something. It's very, very weird. You wouldn't expect to see Omen Hawker in Modern just because 1/1s don't do well in that format. But nobody was expecting it. So
yeah, super cool list. Felix Slew is an excellent player as well, so it wouldn't surprise me, if I was to pick up this deck and I wouldn't do as well. We'll just say that. But yeah, it'd be really interesting to get. It looks like he's not on Twitter anymore. It'd be really interesting to pick his brain on some of these choices and to hear, did you just win a bunch of games because you played Ragavan on turn 1, or was it Omen Hawker was doing a lot of work? Right? It's so hard for us to know. All we see is he went 5/1. He played a super cool deck. Is Nimble Obstructionist cycling really good? Maybe. I don't know what it would be good against, but
fetch lands, I suppose, right?
Yeah, I guess.
It's like a 1-mana stifle with Omen Hawker.
You could do it to turn 2.
Yeah. Gosh. All right, so that's a cool list. And I will propose one too while we're here. Because we've talked about Urza's Saga, you mentioned that as a thing that Omen Hawker can pay for. What would that look like? Urza's Saga plus Omen Hawker would give you access to the constructs pretty quickly. Is there a duplicative effect of Omen Hawker? Kind of, Aether Vial. Aether Vial is kind of a similar card to Omen Hawker if you really squint, right? They're both mana engines that, in Aether Vial's case, it frees up your lands to spend on silly activations because the Vial will cast your creatures. And the Omen Hawker does it in a different way, right? It provides mana to pay for as many Saga activations as you want. There's a shell that has seen a little bit of success with Urza's Saga and Vial. It's like an Asmo cookbook shell that I think Aspiring Spike did a lot of work on. Fiend Artisan became the important card to hold it all together. So Fiend Artisan tends to be 2 mana intensive to be a good standalone card, but in Modern specifically, you can activate it X equals 0 and just get Asmo. So it's tap, pay 1, sack anything to get Asmo, and that actually becomes a very good play. So the engine of the deck is Asmo, 4 cookbook, 4 Vial, 4 Fiend Artisan, 3 Tyvars. Tyvars here to make the Fiend Artisan a little bit more reliable, a little bit faster. It can come back from the graveyard. 4 Urza's Saga, 4 Oval Chase Daredevil. So this is how you're going to win the games. You're going to win by getting Asmo in play, getting Saga, getting your cookbooks, making gigantic constructs, and throwing the food at their stuff. You still have a few thoughts left, and you need to make Fiend Artisan a little bit better, so you end up having the small sacrifice package with Bloodgas, with Priest of Forgotten Gods, and with Citra's Supplier. That's how Aspiring Spike put his package together. I'm going to include those for now. I'm not sure if that's actually necessary. The Omen Hawker does pay for the Fiend Artisan, but it doesn't work in any profitable way with the Citrus Supplier or the Bloodgast. I'm actually more interested in Elvish Reclaimer. I've currently only got one in the lists, but Elvish Reclaimer is a card that, it finds your Urza Saga, one of the most important cards here. It gets paid for in its entirety by Omen Hawker, and I'm wondering if that is enough to like make the Hawker worth it in a shell like this.
Yeah, that's super cool. Like, I like that it pays for Reclaimer and then pays for the saga that it finds. So like all your other mana gets to do normal stuff. And then at the end, you just turn once you don't need the mana anymore from the Hawker, you just turn it into literally anything else with Fiend Artisan or Priest of Forgotten Gods.
Right, like here, we don't need that much from the Hawker. It's kind of like a bonus creature. I think Spike is playing like Unlucky Witness in his bonus creature spot. But the Hawker, it takes you into blue. It makes your cookbook a little more useful if you want to just like trade a cookbook for a creature. You can do that for half the cost now. You can crack a food for free. Equip a Shadow Spear for free.
Yeah, so you're adding the color blue just to play Omen Hawker. There's no other blue card, correct?
Correct, at least as currently constructed. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I like it as a concept. I do like Fiend Artisan with Bloodghast as well. Like, that is intriguing to me.
Yeah. So,
and like just in general, like Citrus Suppliers, like a faux tutor for your Daredevils.
Right. Sure. Exactly. All right. So I haven't tested this at all, but this is how I would build Omen Hawker in Modern if I were forced to. I'm not Felix Liu, so I did not have the genius Wizardcycling package top of my mind. But I do think that there's something there with Urza Saga. And possibly Reclaimer and Fiend Artisan.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this week. I think this card's pretty sweet, and I think a lot of these decks are just really interesting. And I also, at least in Pioneer, it's like not a good time to be proposing a deck with a lot of small creatures because people are ready for red-white revoke. And so I think the shells that are involving it as the only small creature like you're talking about kind of put them in a bind where if our deck can function without it, that's good. And then if it functions with it, like, what are they going to take out all the removal? Well, then we've got this control shell built around it. So I like that as an avenue in the very narrow short term in Pioneer.
Yeah, it should be a fun week. I'm looking forward to it. I've had these cards on the brain for like more than a month now. So excited to finally give them a try.
Excellent. Well, happy hawking of omens to you, to the highest bidder, hopefully.
All right. Thanks, David. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Deck lists for this episode can be found at our homepage, faithlessbrewing.com. Tune in next week for our testing results, plus a look at new previews from Lord of the Rings. Support for this podcast is provided by brewers like you. Join the Faithless family and help support the show at patreon.com/faithlessbrewing for Discord access, bonus content, and more. That's all for today. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.